The day I found all my childhood memories packed in cardboard boxes, stacked hastily in our uninsulated garage. Something broke inside me that I didn't know how to fix. My sister Rachel's triumphant smile as she showed me her new art studio, my former bedroom, was the final twist of the knife. I stood in the doorway, staring at the room I'd slept in for 18 years. The walls, once covered with my swimming medals and photographs, were now bare, waiting for Rachel's vision. My bed was gone, replaced by an elaborate easel and a vintage desk that Mom had apparently found at an estate sale. The hardwood floor, which Dad and I had installed together the summer before I left for college, was now protected by a drop cloth splattered with paint. Isn't it perfect? Rachel spun around, her arms outstretched. Mom and Dad surprised me last weekend. They said since you're only home for holidays anyway, it made more sense for the space to be used year-round. I nodded mechanically, not trusting myself to speak. I was 22, back for the summer after graduating with my nursing degree. For years of grinding through clinicals, night shifts, and exams, sustained by the thought of coming home to regroup before starting my career. I'd turned down a housing stipend that came with my new hospital job, thinking I'd save money by staying with my parents for a few months. Now, I wasn't sure where I was supposed to sleep. "Your stuff is in the garage," Rachel added helpfully as if reading my thoughts. "Mom said you can set up the pull-out couch in the den if you're staying." "If I'm staying in my own home? When did they do this?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Like I said last weekend, it was kind of spur of the moment. Dad and Uncle Mike moved everything. I've been wanting a proper studio space forever, and since I'm taking a gap year to focus on my portfolio before art school. I tuned out her chatter, remembering the confirmation email I'd received from my parents just 2 weeks ago. "Of course, we can't wait to have you home, sweetheart. Your room is waiting for you, just as you left it. We're so proud of you finishing your degree." I walked away while Rachel was mid-sentence, heading for the garage. The musty space was crammed with tools, holiday decorations, and now apparently my life. I found the boxes labeled Elena's room, stacked precariously in the corner. One had split open, spilling photo albums onto the concrete floor. I knelt down, picking up a water-damaged picture of me and Dad at my high school graduation. The humidity in the garage had already started to warp it. "Elena, are you out here?" My mother's voice, bright with forced cheer. "I thought I heard you arrive. We were going to tell you about the room situation, but, oh, you found your things." I stood slowly, turning to face her. Mom was dressed in her gardening clothes, a smudge of dirt on her cheek, looking exactly as she always had. Dependable, present, except now I was seeing her through a new lens. "Tell me when," I asked quietly. "Before or after I drove 7 hours to get here? Before or after I turned down subsidized housing at the hospital?" Her smile faltered. "Don't be dramatic, sweetheart. It's not like we threw your things away. Rachel needs a proper space for her art. You've seen how talented she is. This could be her future. And what about my future? Where am I supposed to sleep while I'm saving for my own place? The den is perfectly comfortable. You'll hardly be here anyway, with your new job keeping you busy." She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Elena, be reasonable. You're an adult now with your own life. Rachel is still figuring things out. She needs our support." The implication hung in the air between us. I didn't need their support anymore. I'd achieved what they expected of me, college degree, stable job, so I was on my own now. Rachel, for years younger and perpetually finding herself, was still entitled to their full attention and resources. It wasn't a new dynamic. Rachel had always been the artistic one, the sensitive one, the one who needed extra help with schoolwork and extra reassurance about everything. I was the self-sufficient one, the responsible one, the one who had it all together. Until this moment, I'd worn that label with pride. "I'm going to get some air," I said, brushing past my mother. I couldn't look at those boxes anymore. I walked out to the front yard, breathing deeply, trying to calm myself. Our rental house, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, looked the same as always. The peeling paint on the shutters, the slightly uneven front steps that Dad kept promising to fix, the hydrangeas Mom had planted the year we moved in, now in full bloom. Mr. Peterson, our elderly neighbor, was watering his roses across the street. He waved when he saw me. "Elena, welcome home. Your folks said you finished up nursing school. Congratulations." I crossed the street, grateful for a friendly face. "Thanks, Mr. Peterson. How have you been?" "Oh, can't complain. These old bones keep moving." He turned off his hose and studied my face. "Something troubling you, dear?" I hesitated, then found myself spilling the whole story. Mr. Peterson had been our neighbor since we moved in when I was 4. He'd watched me grow up, attended my graduation parties, and always had popsicles in his freezer for the neighborhood kids. He listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing increasingly troubled. "That doesn't sound like your parents," he said finally. "They've always been so proud of you." I thought so too. I kicked at a pebble on his immaculate driveway. "Sorry to dump all this on you." "Not at all." He hesitated, then added, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but since you're feeling undervalued, did you know the Sullivans are selling this place?" I stared at him. "What? No, that can't be right. We've lived here for 18 years. Mom and Dad would have said something." Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable. "Well, I only know because Martha Sullivan called me last month. They're getting older and don't want to be landlords anymore. They're offering the current tenants, first, right of refusal before listing it publicly. I assumed your parents were considering it." My mind raced. My parents had always talked about buying a house someday, but something always came up: Rachel's private school tuition, Dad's brief unemployment after his company downsized, the roof repair last year. Was it possible they were finally taking the leap? And if so, why hadn't they mentioned it? "Thanks for telling me, Mr. Peterson. I should probably head back." "Anytime, Elena. And remember, things have a way of working out." I wasn't so sure about that. Walking back to the house, I felt like a visitor rather than someone returning home. I found my father in the kitchen, making his signature spaghetti sauce. "There's my college graduate." He wiped his hands on a dish towel and moved to hug me. I let him, but remained stiff in his embrace. "How was the drive?" "Fine." I stepped back. "Dad, are the Sullivans selling the house?" His wooden spoon clattered against the pot. "Who told you that?" "Mr. Peterson. He said they called last month. Were you planning to tell me?" Dad sighed, turning down the burner. "We were going to discuss it tonight as a family. Yes, the Sullivans offered us the chance to buy before they list it. It's a good opportunity, but the timing isn't great. Because of Rachel's gap year." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. He looked at me sharply. "I see you've discovered the room change. Look, Elena, we were going to prepare the den for you before you arrived. But things got hectic. Rachel's art instructor is submitting her portfolio to a major scholarship competition, and she needed space to complete her final pieces. So my things had to go to the garage, without anyone even calling me. It's not ideal, I admit, but you've always been so adaptable." He stirred the sauce with more force than necessary. "The house, it's more complicated than just Rachel's studio. The Sullivans want $275,000, which is fair for this neighborhood. But with Rachel's art school tuition coming up next year, and the new roof we put on last fall, it's a stretch." I leaned against the counter, processing this. "So you're turning it down?" "We haven't decided yet. The Sullivans are giving us until the end of the month." He looked at me, his expression softening. "We're proud of you, Elena, getting through nursing school, landing that hospital job. You've always been our rock. Rachel just needs a different kind of support right now." The familiar refrain. Rachel needs. Rachel deserves. Rachel can't handle. I think I need to lie down, I said. It's been a long drive. Of course. The den's not set up yet, but you can use our room if you want to rest before dinner. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without saying something I'd regret. As I turned to leave, Dad called after me. Elena, we really are proud of you. I hope you know that. I wondered if pride was enough when it didn't translate to actual consideration. In my parents' room, I lay on their carefully made bed, staring at the ceiling. The house I'd thought of as home for 18 years suddenly felt foreign. The revelation about the Sullivans' offer added another layer of betrayal. My parents were considering a major life decision, one that would impact all of us, and hadn't even mentioned it to me. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya, my best friend from nursing school. Made it home okay? Call me later. I texted back. Home is a relative term. Apparently I've been demoted to the garage and pull-out couch. Call you tonight with details. 3 dots appeared immediately then. WTF? Your sister's art thing again? You guessed it. Plus house drama, I'll explain later. I set my phone aside and closed my eyes, trying to think rationally. I had options. I could stay here, sleeping on the pull-out couch, swallowing my resentment until I saved enough for my own place. I could call the hospital and see if that housing stipend was still available, though it would mean commuting an extra 30 minutes each way. Or I could find a roommate situation, stretching my budget even thinner than planned. None of these options appealed to me. I had worked so hard, done everything right. Straight A's in high school, scholarship to nursing school, landing a position in a competitive new graduate program. I'd never asked for special treatment, just basic respect. An idea began to form in my mind. A crazy, impulsive, possibly life-altering idea. I sat up and opened my banking app. Between my savings from part-time jobs during college and the generous graduation gift from my grandmother, I had just over $30,000. Not enough for a conventional down payment on a $275,000 house, but I Googled first-time homebuyer programs and fell down a research rabbit hole. FHA loans required only 3.5% down for qualified buyers. With my credit score and stable new job, I might qualify. There were also special programs for healthcare workers in some areas. By the time my mother called me for dinner, I'd scheduled consultations with 2 mortgage brokers for the following day. At the dinner table, the tension was palpable. Rachel chatted excitedly about her art projects, while my parents nodded encouragingly. I pushed spaghetti around my plate, answering direct questions with minimal responses. Elena, my mother finally said, we know the room situation isn't ideal, but it's temporary. Once you're settled in your job, you'll want your own place anyway. Actually, I set down my fork. I've been thinking about that. Tell me more about the Sullivans' offer. My parents exchanged glances. Like I said, Dad began cautiously, they're asking $275,000. They're motivated to sell quickly because they're moving to Florida. The house needs some updates, but it's structurally sound. Would they consider owner financing? I asked, using a term I'd just learned in my frantic research. Dad looked surprised. I doubt it. Why do you ask? Just curious. I took a sip of water, mind racing. When are they listing it publicly? June 1st, if we don't make an offer first. Elena, where is this going? I set down my glass carefully. What if I bought it? A beat of silence. Then all 3 of them burst into laughter. Very funny, Mom said, reaching for the salad. I know you're upset about the room, but sarcasm doesn't help. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm seriously considering making an offer. The laughter stopped. My father's forehead creased with concern. Elena, buying a house is complicated. You need a down payment, closing costs, good credit. I have savings, and there are special loan programs for first-time buyers. My credit score is excellent, and my job is secure. But you just graduated, my mother protested. You haven't even started working yet. No bank will approve you without income history. My employment contract is guaranteed for 2 years with scheduled raises. That counts as stable income. I was repeating information I'd read 30 minutes ago, but I delivered it with confidence. Rachel looked between us, confused. Wait, are you actually serious? You want to buy this house? Why not? I know the property. I love the neighborhood. The timing seems right. But where would we live? Rachel asked, her voice small. I met her eyes directly. That would be up to you. If I owned the house, I'd be the landlord. You could stay as my tenants, or you could find another place. Your choice. The implications of what I was saying sank in. My parents' expressions shifted from confusion to shock to something like fear. You can't be serious, my father said. This is our home. It's the Sullivans' home, I corrected him. You've been renting it for 18 years. If you wanted to call it yours, you could have bought it any time. That's not fair, my mother snapped. We had other priorities. Your education, for one. And Rachel's. Special needs, I finished for her. Yes, I know. Rachel has always been the priority. But I'm making myself the priority now. Rachel pushed back from the table, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't ask them to give me your room. Don't punish everyone because you're mad at Mom and Dad. I softened slightly. This isn't about punishing anyone, Rachel. It's about recognizing an opportunity. If Mom and Dad don't want to buy this house, why shouldn't I try? Because it's vindictive, my mother exclaimed. You're angry about the bedroom, so you're threatening to become our landlord? Or worse, evict us? After everything we've done for you. Her words stung, but also clarified something for me. In their minds, I owed them. My education, my upbringing, my very existence came with strings attached. I was expected to remain the accommodating daughter forever, putting my needs last, accepting whatever scraps of consideration came my way. I have an appointment with a mortgage broker tomorrow, I said calmly. I'll let you know what I find out. I stood up, taking my half-eaten dinner to the kitchen. Elena, wait, my father called. Let's discuss this rationally. But I was done talking for the night. I rinsed my plate, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. Where are you going? My mother demanded. To check into a hotel. I need space to think, and apparently there's no room for me here anyway. I spent the night in a budget hotel a few miles away, alternating between second-guessing myself and doubling down on my impulsive plan. Was I overreacting to the bedroom situation? Possibly. Was this a financially sound decision? I wasn't sure, but something about taking control, about turning the tables, felt necessary for my self-respect. In the morning, I met with a mortgage broker named Diane, who listened to my situation without judgment. It's not as far-fetched as your parents might think, she said after reviewing my finances. With an FHA loan, you'd need about $9,625 for the down payment. There would be additional closing costs, but some of those could potentially be covered by seller concessions. What about my limited work history? Your employment contract helps. The guaranteed salary and length of employment will reassure lenders. Plus, healthcare professionals are generally considered stable borrowers. She tapped her pen against her notepad. It won't be the easiest approval, but it's doable. I've seen less qualified buyers get approved. Hope surged through me. How quickly could this happen? If everything goes smoothly, 30 to 45 days from accepted offer to closing. But first, you need to get pre-approved, make an offer, and get it accepted. I left her office with a list of documents to gather and a tentative pre-approval letter, pending final verification of my employment. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my mother and a text from my father. Please come home so we can talk about this reasonably. Instead of responding, I drove to the coffee shop where I'd arranged to meet Martha Sullivan, the owner of our house. Mr. Peterson had given me her contact information. Martha was in her 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "Elena, look at you all grown up. Harold told me you finished nursing school. Your parents must be so proud." I swallowed hard. "They say they are." She studied my face. "Is everything all right, dear? I was surprised to get your call." "Mrs. Sullivan, I understand you're selling the house." She nodded. "Yes, it's time. Richard and I are moving to Naples next month. His arthritis can't take another Michigan winter." She sipped her tea. "We offered your parents first right of refusal, of course. They've been wonderful tenants." "Have they given you an answer?" "Not yet. They asked for more time to consider, which we granted, but we'll need to know by the end of the month." I took a deep breath. "What if I made you an offer instead?" Her eyebrows rose. "You? Well, that's unexpected." "I know, but I'm established now, with a good job at Mercy Hospital. I've always loved that house, and I'm in a position to buy it." This was stretching the truth, but I projected confidence. Martha looked thoughtful. "What about your parents?" "They're undecided, and I'm ready to put down roots." "Well, technically the offer was extended to the current tenants, which would be your parents. But since you lived there most of your life—" She sighed. "I'd need to discuss it with Richard." "I understand, and I wouldn't want to go behind my parents' backs. I just want to know if it's a possibility." She patted my hand. "Let me talk to Richard and get back to you. And maybe you should have another conversation with your folks." I nodded, though I was dreading the confrontation waiting for me at home. When I finally returned, my parents were waiting in the living room, facing the door like an intervention committee. Rachel was noticeably absent. "Where have you been?" my mother demanded. "We've been worried sick." "I had meetings. About the house." My father sighed heavily. "Elena, this has gone far enough. You're upset about the bedroom, and we understand that. We should have consulted you before making changes. But threatening to buy the house out from under us is extreme." "Is it?" I sat down across from them. "I'm not doing this as revenge. I'm doing it because it makes sense for me." "How could it possibly make sense?" my mother asked. "You're 22, just starting your career. Homeownership is a huge responsibility, one I'm ready for, and the timing is perfect. I have the down payment. Interest rates are low, and I know this property inside and out." "What about maintenance?" Dad challenged. "The furnace is original to the house. The water heater is on its last legs. Are you prepared for those expenses?" "I've done the math. My mortgage payment would be less than what you're paying in rent, even accounting for taxes and insurance. I can build an emergency fund for repairs." My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication honed over decades of marriage. "You've really thought this through," Dad said finally, sounding almost impressed despite himself. "I have." I leaned forward. "Look, I'm not trying to hurt you, but finding my things in the garage, learning about the house from Mr. Peterson instead of you, it made me realize I need to start prioritizing myself." "We've always prioritized you," my mother protested. "Everything we've done has been for you and Rachel." "I know you believe that, but from where I'm sitting, Rachel's needs always come first. Her special classes, her art supplies, her therapy appointments. Even now, with her gap year and art studio." "That's not fair," Dad said quietly. "Rachel struggles in ways you never did. You were always so capable, so independent. And that's my punishment? Being taken for granted because I don't make a scene? Having my belongings packed up without notice because I'm expected to just roll with it?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We never meant to make you feel less important. But you did, and now I need to make decisions based on what's best for me, not what's most convenient for everyone else." A heavy silence settled over the room. Outside, a lawnmower droned, a normal sound from a normal day, at odds with the seismic shift happening inside our family. So what happens now? Dad asked finally. I've been pre-approved for a mortgage, pending employment verification. I've spoken to Mrs. Sullivan. She's discussing it with her husband. You've been busy, he noted, a hint of pride seeping through his concern. I have. And if you buy the house, what happens to us? My mother's voice was small. That's up to you. You can stay as my tenants with a proper lease, or you can find somewhere else. You'd really evict your own family? She looked stricken. I didn't say that, but I would expect to be treated with respect in my own home. No more unilateral decisions about my space. Dad rubbed his forehead. This is a lot to process. I know. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this, but I'm not sorry for standing up for myself. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the conversation. I'm going to check on my things in the garage. Some of my photos were getting water damage. As I walked away, I heard my mother's muffled sobs and my father's low, comforting murmur. I felt a pang of guilt, quickly followed by resolve. This wasn't about hurting them. It was about healing myself. In the garage, I began reorganizing my belongings, rescuing water-damaged items, and making mental notes of what I'd need for my own place, whether it was this house or somewhere else. As I worked, the garage door creaked open. Rachel stood there, her eyes red from crying. Is it true? She asked. Are you really going to buy the house and kick us out? I sighed, setting down the photo album I'd been drying. I'm considering buying the house. I haven't decided about the rest. She stepped into the garage, hugging herself. I'm sorry about your room. I didn't know they hadn't told you. It's not your fault. And I meant it. Rachel had always been caught in the middle of our parents' lopsided attention distribution. She hadn't asked to be treated as fragile, just as I hadn't asked to be treated as indestructible. Your pictures are ruined. She picked up a water-damaged photo of us at the beach. I can fix this, you know. I'm good at restoration. The peace offering touched me. That would be nice. Thanks. She sat on a nearby box. If you buy the house, would you really make us leave? I met her eyes. Honestly, I don't know. I'm still working through a lot of feelings. I get it. They baby me too much. It's suffocating sometimes. This surprised me. Rachel had always seemed to bask in her parents' attention. Really? I always thought you loved being their focus. She shrugged. Sometimes. But it's also like they don't think I can handle anything. At least they trust you to figure things out. I laughed without humor. Trust, or just don't think about? Both, maybe. She picked at a loose thread on her sweater. For what it's worth, I think it's badass that you're trying to buy the house. Terrifying, but badass. Coming from my sister, this was high praise. Thanks, Rach. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the tension between us easing slightly. Then my phone rang, an unknown number with a local area code. Hello. Elena? It's Martha Sullivan. Richard and I have discussed your inquiry, and we'd like to meet with you. Is tomorrow morning possible? My heart raced. Yes, absolutely. Good. And Elena? You might want to bring your parents. This concerns them too. As I hung up, Rachel watched me curiously. The house owners? I nodded. They want to meet tomorrow. With all of us. Sounds serious. It is. I looked around at my belongings, scattered and damaged, but still mine. Everything's about to change one way or another. That night, I stayed in the house, setting up the pull-out couch in the den myself. It was uncomfortable and creaked with every movement, but it was a small victory to reclaim even this much space for myself. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered what tomorrow would bring, and whether I was ready for the consequences of my impulsive decision. In the morning, the Sullivan meeting loomed over breakfast. My parents were quiet, moving around each other with careful precision, like dancers avoiding collision. Rachel slept in as usual. I sipped my coffee, reviewing mortgage documents on my laptop, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "We should leave in 20 minutes, Dad said, checking his watch. "The Sullivans are meeting us at their daughter's house." I nodded, closing my laptop. "I'll be ready." Mom hovered nearby, straightening already straight items on the counter. "Elena, before we go, whatever happens today, I want you to know we never meant to hurt you." Her sincerity was evident, but it didn't erase the years of imbalance. "I know, Mom, but intent doesn't always match impact." She looked as if she wanted to say more, but just nodded and went to get her purse. The drive to the Sullivans' daughter's house was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. When we arrived, Martha greeted us warmly, ushering us into a sunlit living room where her husband, Richard, waited. "Thank you all for coming," Richard said, gesturing for us to sit. "We have a somewhat unusual situation here, and we thought it best to address it directly." My father cleared his throat. "Richard, Martha, before we begin, I want to apologize for any confusion. Elena's interest in the house came as a surprise to us, and we—" Richard held up a hand. "No need to explain, James. We understand family dynamics can be complicated." Martha smiled kindly. "We've received 2 offers for our property. One from you, James and Linda, requesting more time and possibly seller financing for a portion of the down payment, and one from Elena, who's been pre-approved for a conventional loan." My parents looked at me in surprise. I hadn't told them about my meeting with a second mortgage broker, who had found me a better option than the FHA loan. "As you know," Richard continued, "we need to sell quickly to facilitate our move to Florida. Martha's sister is having health issues, and we want to be closer to her." My stomach clenched. They were going to accept my offer. The realization brought both triumph and terror. "After careful consideration," Martha said, "we've decided the fairest approach is to give both parties an equal opportunity. We're asking for final offers by this Friday with proof of financing. We'll make our decision based not just on price, but on certainty of closing." It wasn't what I'd expected. Not an acceptance, but not a rejection either. A competition with my own parents. "That seems reasonable," my father said carefully. "Elena, are you comfortable with this arrangement?" All eyes turned to me. I was suddenly aware of the magnitude of what I was doing. This wasn't just about asserting independence or teaching my parents a lesson. This was a house, a home, and a significant financial commitment. "Yes," I said finally. "I am." Martha smiled, relieved. "Wonderful. We'll expect your offers by 5 p.m. Friday. Our asking price remains $275,000, but we're open to reasonable negotiations from both parties." As we left, my parents walked ahead to the car while I lingered to thank the Sullivans. "Elena!" Martha took my hand. "I hope you know what you're doing, dear. Family is precious." "I do know," I assured her, though my confidence was wavering. "And thank you for giving me a fair chance." Back in the car, the silence was deafening. Finally, Dad spoke. "So, you're really going through with this?" It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, I am." "Then I guess we're officially competing." He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. May the best buyer win. The gauntlet had been thrown. For the next 3 days, we circled each other cautiously at home, all of us aware that the dynamics were shifting irreversibly. I worked remotely with my mortgage broker, securing the strongest possible financing terms. My parents made hushed phone calls and studied their finances at the kitchen table late into the night. Rachel observed it all with wide eyes, occasionally serving as a reluctant intermediary. "Dad's talking about cashing in his 401k," she reported one evening, perched on the edge of my pull-out couch. "Mom thinks it's a terrible idea." I felt a twinge of guilt. They shouldn't do that. The penalties would be substantial. "I know, but they're freaking out about where we'll live if you win." She picked at her nail polish. "They've been looking at apartments online. Nothing as nice as this place. The guilt intensified, but so did my resolve. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about being seen, being valued, being treated as an equal member of the family. They've had 18 years to buy this house, Ratch. They chose not to prioritize it. I know. She sighed. It's just weird, watching you guys fight like this. You've always been the peacekeeper. Had I? I supposed I had, swallowing my own needs to maintain family harmony. That pattern was breaking now, for better or worse. Friday arrived with a tension so thick it felt hard to breathe. I submitted my offer early, $280,000, slightly above asking, with conventional financing and a quick closing timeline. My parents were still finalizing their paperwork when I left for a coffee shop, unable to bear the waiting in close quarters. My phone rang at 4:30. Martha Sullivan's name flashed on the screen. Hello. Elena, dear. We've received your offer, and it's very strong. But before we make any decisions, Richard and I would like to propose an alternative solution. My heart raced. What kind of solution? We'd like you and your parents to come over one more time. Tonight, if possible. I agreed, then texted my parents about the meeting. Whatever the Sullivans were planning, it would all be over soon. That evening, we gathered once again in their daughter's living room. Martha served tea while Richard organized some papers on the coffee table. We've reviewed both offers, he began. They're both strong in different ways. Elena's offers a higher purchase price and faster closing. James and Linda's includes a personal letter about what this house has meant to your family. I glanced at my parents. They'd written a letter? Somehow this detail hurt more than the competition itself. Rather than choose between you, Martha continued, we've come up with what we hope is a fair compromise. Richard slid a document across the table. We're proposing a co-ownership arrangement. Elena and her parents would own the house jointly, with Elena holding a 51% majority stake. You'd all sign an operating agreement detailing how decisions about the property are made. I stared at the paper, shocked. Co-owning with my parents? The very people I was trying to establish boundaries with. This solution acknowledges Elena's stronger financial position, Martha explained, while respecting James and Linda's long history with the property. You'd essentially be partners. Partners, my father repeated, sounding equally stunned. We can give you some privacy to discuss it, Richard offered, standing. Please, my mother said faintly. When the Sullivans left the room, we sat in silence, the proposal between us like a ticking bomb. Well, Dad finally said, this is unexpected. It's impossible, I countered. We can barely agree on dinner plans. How would we manage a house? My mother looked between us, her eyes reflecting the same uncertainty I felt. Maybe it's not as impossible as it seems. We could set clear parameters. Like what? I asked skeptically. How would we handle maintenance decisions? Who would live where? Would you pay me rent for my majority share, or would I pay you for the minority portion? Dad rubbed his forehead. Those are all valid questions, but maybe there's a way to make it work. Martha Sullivan poked her head in. I don't mean to interrupt, but I should mention that the co-ownership doesn't necessarily mean cohabitation. Elena could rent her portion to you, or vice versa, or you could sell to each other later. This possibility hadn't occurred to me. If I owned 51%, I'd have control. I could choose to live elsewhere and rent to my parents, establishing both independence and a revenue stream. Or if things didn't work out, I could potentially buy them out completely later. Can we have until tomorrow to decide? I asked. Of course. Richard nodded, but no later. We need to move forward one way or another. On the drive home, we maintained the same tense silence, each lost in calculation. Rachel was waiting anxiously when we arrived. Well, what happened? Mom explained the co-ownership proposal while I paced the kitchen, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to reject the deal outright. It wasn't the clean break I'd envisioned. but another part recognized the practical advantages. Later that night, I sat on the pull-out couch, creating spreadsheets to analyze different scenarios. Dad knocked softly on the doorframe. "Got a minute?" I nodded, making space for him to sit. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "I've been thinking about this co-ownership idea," he said. "I know it's not what either of us wanted, but it might be the best solution for everyone." "I'm not sure about that," I replied. "It seems complicated." "Life is complicated, Elena." He smiled faintly. "Especially family." We sat in silence for a moment, the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop screen. "You know," he said finally, "I've always admired your determination. Even as a little girl, once you set your mind to something, that was it. Remember when you decided to learn to swim after that incident at Lake Michigan?" I did remember. I'd been 8, caught in a riptide, terrified as the water pulled me away from shore. Dad had swum out to rescue me, and afterward, I'd announced I was never going near water again. But 2 weeks later, I'd asked for swimming lessons. By the end of the summer, I was fearlessly diving off the high board. "You've always faced your fears," Dad continued. "It's what makes you a good nurse and a good daughter, even when we haven't been the best parents." His admission caught me off guard. "You've tried your best." "We have, but our best wasn't always good enough, was it? Especially for you." He sighed heavily. "We got so focused on Rachel's needs that we took your strength for granted. I see that now." My throat tightened. "Why did you put my things in the garage, Dad? Why didn't you at least call me first?" He looked ashamed. "It was impulsive. Rachel had a breakdown about her portfolio deadline, and we were trying to help her focus. We thought we'd have time to prepare the den before you arrived." He shook his head. "It was thoughtless, and I'm sorry." His apology, simple and direct, loosened something inside me. "Thank you for saying that. So, what do you think about this co-ownership idea?" "Honestly," I hesitated. "I think it could work under the right conditions, but I'd need some guarantees." "Such as?" "I'd want my bedroom back, for starters. Rachel can use a corner of the basement for her art studio. It has better ventilation for paint fumes anyway. And I'd want us to make decisions together about the property, even though I'd have majority ownership." Dad nodded slowly. "Those seem like reasonable requests. And what about the financial arrangement?" "I'd pay the mortgage with my share. You'd pay with yours. Proportional to ownership. Same with taxes and insurance. For major repairs, we'd need to agree on a reserve fund." He looked impressed. "You've really thought this through." "I've had to. This isn't just about hurt feelings anymore, Dad. It's about my financial future." "I understand." He stood, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "Let's sleep on it and talk again in the morning." After he left, I called Maya. "Co-owning with your parents!" she exclaimed when I explained the situation. "After all this drama? Are you sure?" "I'm not sure of anything right now." I stared at the ceiling. "But it might be the most practical solution." "Since when are you practical about something this emotional?" She paused. "Unless this was your endgame all along, to get them to finally take you seriously." I hadn't thought of it that way, but maybe she was right. What I wanted more than the house itself was recognition, respect, a seat at the table when family decisions were made. "Maybe," I admitted, "but now I have to decide if co-ownership is worth it, or if I should just push for full ownership and deal with the fallout." "What does your gut tell you?" I considered this. That owning 51% of a house is better than owning 0%. That this could be an investment in more ways than one. And that maybe, just maybe, this whole experience has opened my parents' eyes a little. "Then I think you have your answer." In the morning, I found my parents at the kitchen table, nursing coffee cups and serious expressions. "We've been talking," Mom said as I poured myself coffee, "about the co-ownership proposal." I sat down, cradling my mug. "So have I." And Dad prompted. I think it could work, with clear boundaries and expectations. I made a list. I pulled out the notes I'd prepared. First, I get my bedroom back. It's non-negotiable. Mom nodded. That's fair. We should have handled that differently. Second, we establish a formal operating agreement for the house, detailing how decisions are made and costs are shared. I want everything in writing. Smart, Dad acknowledged. We'd want that too. Third, we agree to monthly family meetings to discuss the property and any issues that arise. No more unilateral decisions. Mom looked uncomfortable, but nodded. We can do that. And finally, we agree that this arrangement is potentially temporary. If at any point one party wants to sell their share, the other has first right of refusal. My parents exchanged glances. That all sounds reasonable, Dad said. We have a few conditions of our own. I braced myself. Go on. We want Rachel to feel secure here while she prepares for art school. That means a dedicated space for her work, even if it's not your former bedroom. The basement could work, with proper ventilation, I conceded. What else? We want acknowledgement that we've contributed to this house in ways that aren't purely financial, Mom said. 18 years of maintenance, improvements, and care. I hadn't expected this, but it was a fair point. I can acknowledge that in the operating agreement, your experience with the property is valuable. And lastly, Dad added, we want a family commitment to making this work. Not just the business arrangement, but the personal relationships. Regular dinners, open communication, professional mediation if necessary. This gave me pause. They weren't just accepting my terms. They were actively trying to heal the family dynamic. It was more than I'd expected. I can agree to that, I said finally. So we're doing this. Co-ownership. Dad extended his hand across the table. Partner. I shook it, feeling strange, but cautiously optimistic. Partner. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I still can't believe my baby is becoming our landlord. Co-owner, I corrected gently. We're in this together now. Rachel shambled into the kitchen, hair disheveled from sleep. Did you guys figure it out? We're going with the co-ownership plan, Dad informed her. Elena will have majority stake, but we'll all be invested in the property. Cool. She yawned. Does this mean I have to call her boss now? Despite everything, we all laughed, the tension finally breaking. It means, I told her, that you're moving your art stuff to the basement. I'm taking my room back. She looked briefly disappointed, then shrugged. The light might actually be better down there for my oil paintings. And it's bigger. See, Mom said brightly. Win-win. I wasn't naive enough to think all our problems were solved. There would be disagreements, adjustments, and moments of resentment ahead. But for the first time in days, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. We called the Sullivans and accepted their proposal. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, inspections, and negotiations. I moved back into my bedroom, helping Rachel set up an improved studio space in the basement. My parents and I established a formal operating agreement with the help of a real estate attorney, detailing every aspect of our unusual arrangement. The day we signed the final paperwork was surreal. The Sullivans beamed as we all shook hands, officially transferring ownership of the property that had been our rental home for 18 years. Congratulations, homeowners, Martha said warmly. I think this arrangement will work out beautifully for everyone. As we walked back to the car, now our car parked outside our house, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. I'm proud of you, Elena. Not many 22-year-olds would take on this kind of responsibility. Not many would have to, I pointed out, but without the bitterness that would have colored the words a few weeks ago. True, but not many would handle it with such maturity. He squeezed my shoulder. You're going to be a wonderful nurse. You already have the patience and problem-solving skills. His praise warmed me. It felt genuine in a way that their routine, "We're proud of you," platitudes never had. That evening, we had a small celebration dinner. Mom made my favorite lasagna, and Dad opened a bottle of champagne. "To new beginnings," he toasted, raising his glass. "And to Elena, who pushed us to make a long overdue investment in our future." Rachel raised her sparkling cider. "And to me, for being flexible about my art studio." "And to us," Mom added softly, "for finding a way forward together." As we clinked glasses, I realized something profound had shifted in our family dynamic. For the first time, I was being treated as a full adult, an equal partner rather than the reliable daughter who could be counted on to accommodate everyone else's needs. The transition wasn't perfect. There were moments of friction as we adjusted to our new arrangement. The first time I had to remind my parents that we needed to discuss replacing the dishwasher before making a purchase. Dad bristled at having to consult his daughter about household decisions. The first time Mom referred to it as our house without acknowledging my majority ownership, I felt a flare of the old resentment. But we were trying. Each month, we held a formal family meeting about the property, discussing maintenance issues, improvement plans, and any tensions that had arisen. These meetings sometimes felt awkward, but they established a new pattern of respect and consideration. 6 months after the purchase, I was settled into my nursing career and the new family dynamic. My bedroom was once again my sanctuary, decorated exactly as I wanted. Rachel had thrived in her basement studio, creating a portfolio that earned her a substantial scholarship to her dream art school. And my parents, to my surprise, had become enthusiastic about home ownership, tackling long-deferred projects with new energy. "We should have done this years ago," Dad admitted one Saturday as we painted the front porch together. "Owning feels different, even if it's only partial ownership." "It's an investment in your future," I told him, echoing the phrase he'd used countless times during my childhood. He laughed, recognizing his own words. "Touché, Elena. You always were a quick study." As we worked side by side, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought us here. What had begun as hurt and anger over a displaced bedroom had evolved into a complex lesson in assertiveness, negotiation, and mutual respect. I'd discovered strengths I hadn't known I possessed, and my family had been forced to see me in a new light. "You know," Dad said, interrupting my thoughts, "when you first said you wanted to buy the house, I was angry. I thought you were being vindictive." I was a little, I admitted, but I also saw an opportunity that made financial sense. "Well, your timing was perfect. Property values in this neighborhood have already increased since we bought." He applied a careful stroke of paint to a porch column. "Your investment instincts are good. You should consider diversifying once you've built up some more savings." His casual financial advice, offered as one adult to another, felt like a milestone. 6 months ago, he'd laughed at the idea of me buying a house. Now he was discussing investment strategies with me. Later that evening, as we all sat on the newly painted porch enjoying the summer twilight, Mom brought out a package wrapped in silver paper. "A little housewarming gift," she said, handing it to me. "Better late than never." Inside was a beautifully framed document, our home's deed with all 4 of our names listed as owners, though mine appeared first with a 51% designation. Along the matting, Mom had written a quote, "Home is where your story begins." "We wanted you to know that we see you," she said softly, "not just as our daughter or Rachel's sister, but as a woman with her own path. We're sorry it took something this dramatic for us to recognize that." I blinked back tears, touched by the gesture. "Thank you." Rachel leaned over to look at the framed deed. "So what's our story now?" The family that almost imploded, but ended up in bizarro real estate co-ownership instead. We all laughed, her bluntness breaking the emotional moment. "Something like that," I agreed, "with sequels to follow." "Speaking of the future," Dad said, "your mother and I have been thinking. We've always wanted to do some traveling once Rachel was in college. With you as co-owner, We could potentially rent out our portion while we're away. I raised my eyebrows. You'd trust me to manage the property? Of course. He looked surprised at my question. You've proven yourself more than capable. His confidence in me felt like a healing balm on old wounds. We'd need to amend our operating agreement, but it could work. Mom reached over to squeeze my hand. We're not planning anything immediately, but it's good to know we have options. That's what this arrangement has given all of us. Choices we didn't have before. As twilight deepened into night, I sat with my family on the porch of the house that was now truly ours in all the complex, messy ways that ownership entailed. The journey hadn't been easy, and we were still finding our way in this new relationship. But something fundamental had changed, not just in our legal arrangement, but in how we saw each other. I thought back to that first day, finding my belongings relegated to the garage, the hurt and anger that had propelled me to take such a dramatic stand. In the moment, it had felt like an ending, the final proof that my place in the family would always be secondary, my needs always less important than Rachel's. Instead, it had become a beginning, a reset of long-established patterns, a recognition that I wasn't just the reliable daughter who would always accommodate, but a woman with legitimate needs and boundaries. Penny for your thoughts. Rachel asked, nudging me with her foot. Just thinking about how differently this could have gone, I admitted. If I hadn't stood up for myself. If you all hadn't been willing to listen. If the Sullivans hadn't been so wise, Mom added. Their co-ownership suggestion was inspired. If the financial timing hadn't worked out, Dad contributed pragmatically. So basically we got lucky, Rachel concluded. I shook my head. Not just lucky. We made choices. All of us. Hard ones, uncomfortable ones. That's what changed things. Dad nodded thoughtfully. You know, when you're a parent, you fall into patterns without realizing it. Rachel needed more attention in certain ways, so we got used to giving it. And you seemed so self-sufficient that we took advantage, I finished for him. I know you didn't mean to, but that's what happened. Yes, he acknowledged, his candor another sign of our evolving relationship. We did, and I'm sorry. I am too, Mom added, but I'm grateful you forced us to see it, to change. Rachel stretched, her artist's hands gesturing expressively. So the moral of our story is, if your family puts your stuff in the garage by their house. We all laughed, the sound carrying into the quiet neighborhood night. Not exactly, I smiled. Maybe it's more like, sometimes you have to disrupt everything to build something better. I'll drink to that. Dad raised his iced tea in another toast. To disruption and reconstruction. We clinked glasses under the emerging stars, co-owners of more than just a house, co-owners of a new family narrative, one in which every member had equal value and voice. It wasn't the outcome I'd imagined when I'd stood in that garage among my water-damaged photographs, burning with hurt and righteousness. It was messier, more complicated, but ultimately more meaningful. The house was just a building, after all. The real investment had been in ourselves, in our willingness to break patterns, confront uncomfortable truths, and rebuild relationships on a foundation of mutual respect. That was the true ownership I'd been seeking all along. 2 years later, much had changed. Rachel was thriving in her second year of art school, coming home for holidays with impressive portfolios and paint-stained clothes. I had been promoted to charge nurse, balancing increased responsibility at work with my role as the household's majority owner. My parents had taken their first extended trip, spending 3 months exploring the national parks while I managed the property in their absence. The house itself had transformed under our collective care. The peeling shutters had been replaced, the uneven front steps rebuilt, the kitchen modernized with energy-efficient appliances. Each improvement had been discussed in our monthly meetings, decisions made collaboratively rather than unilaterally. On the anniversary of our purchase, we gathered for a special dinner to celebrate not just our home ownership, but the journey it represented. I have an announcement, I told them as we finished dessert. I've been approved for a loan to buy out your shares if you're interested in selling. My parents exchanged surprised glances. Why would we sell? Dad asked. The arrangement has been working well. It has, I agreed. But I thought you might want the capital for your retirement plans. And I'm in a position now to take on full ownership. Mom studied me carefully. Is that what you want, Elena? For us to move out? Not necessarily. You could stay as tenants if you wanted. I just wanted to give you the option. They were silent for a moment, then Dad smiled. I appreciate the offer, but I think we'll keep our ownership stake for now. This arrangement has taught us all too much to abandon it so soon. Besides, Mom added, I don't think we could have navigated Rachel's art school expenses so comfortably without the security of partial home ownership. I nodded, oddly relieved. The truth was, I'd made the offer more out of curiosity than desire. Would they jump at the chance to end our business partnership? Would they feel threatened by my ability to buy them out entirely? Instead, they had chosen to continue our unconventional arrangement, valuing what we'd built together over financial convenience or traditional family dynamics. In that case, I raised my glass, here's to another year of co-ownership, with all its complications and rewards. And to Elena, Rachel chimed in, who turned having her stuff moved to the garage into the best thing that ever happened to this family. As we toasted, I reflected on how differently things might have gone had I swallowed my hurt that day, accepted the pull-out couch without protest, continued the pattern of accommodation that had defined my role for so long. Perhaps I would have found another place to live, drifting away from my family, carrying unspoken resentment for years to come. Instead, I had disrupted everything, challenged the established order, demanded recognition, created an entirely new dynamic. It hadn't been easy. It had required courage, persistence, and the willingness to risk relationships that mattered deeply to me. But looking around at my family, at my sister who now saw me as someone to admire rather than compete with, at my parents who had learned to truly see me, I knew it had been worth it. The house was beautiful, the investment sound, but the real value was in what we'd built inside these walls. A family where everyone had a voice, everyone had worth, and everyone belonged. Not despite our differences and past hurts, but because we'd faced them honestly and chosen to grow. Together. The garage was just a storage space now, organized and clean. And I was more than just the reliable daughter, the accommodating sister. I was Elena, nurse, homeowner, equal. The person who had taught her family that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand your ground. And sometimes, just sometimes, you can buy the ground you're standing on.